Arc 7 Chapter 34 Carriage traveled slowly, and not so idyllically. The carriage moved along the street. The chestnut-haired giant swinging gale horse was carefully escorting the carriage, carrying Subaru and the others with a delicacy that belied its strong figure. Subaru, as expected. This is no lady, it's just Zik was Anne's favorite horse. Looking at the galloping gale horse, Subaru reminisced about it with a lord in his mind. The name of Zik's beloved horse, which he borrowed, was Ldi, a word similar to lady and a near pin, and he indeed thought it was fate for the womanizer. In any case, thanks to Ldi's efforts, the group's journey to the demon city of Kesflame was going smoothly. If things continued to go smoothly, they were expected to arrive in about 4 days. Subaru. But it's not just about getting there. It's not only the reputation of the 9 divine generals that we're going to meet, but also the name of the demon city that scares me. It's a city with the word demon in its name. Subaru didn't think it's going to be a simple matter. He had heard that it's a salad bowl of various races, but is that enough for it to be treated as a city with the words chaos and demon in its name? The fact that the city is ruled by the 9 divine generals, who are constantly causing rebellion, gave him the impression that the city is only appealing to Subaru's sense of danger. That's one of the reasons why he didn't bring Rem along. Subaru. I wonder what kind of chaos awaits us at ? I don't know what chaos awaits me, but my mind is still a mess. Bro's usual outfit and the one I know don't overlap properly right now and it's buggy. Subaru. Oh, you're still talking like that? In the front seat of the spacious carriage, Subaru, who had been looking out the window at the back of Ldi's lightly running carriage, turned around while gently stroking her long black hair that was blowing in the wind with her hand. Occupying a 3-seater seat with a slouched posture, Al hooked his fingers in the chin of his helmet, making the raised face look down. Al, you're definitely doing that on purpose, aren't you? He blurted out in a bitter tone of voice at Subaru's behavior. Subaru shrugged his shoulders, feeling disappointed at Al's rejection. Surprisingly, Al was the second person after Rem who complained about Subaru's cross-dressing. Abel, the Shadracks, the O'Connell siblings, and Zik had all naturally let it go after accepting it once, but he kept harping on it. Subaru, you're complaining with the same tongue that said you'd support me. Was that whole mysterious exchange a lie? Al, it's not a lie, and the decision to help Bro is genuine, but that's not what this is about. Why is it that we have to favor our bros cross-dressing as an equal to our cooperation? Subaru, if you're on my side, I'd like you to accept me as I am for the time being. Al, are you sure you want to be brothers in that disguise? Seriously? When he said that again, Subaru felt that it was a bit unreasonable. Even though Natsuki Subaru and Natsumi Schwartz share the same body that bears their names, there was a clear difference in the way they are and the way they stand. In other words, Natsuki Subaru was the grounded version of himself, while Natsumi Schwartz was a fluffy, idealized image. Subaru, of course, I'm not trying to be a woman. I'm talking about confidence and all that. Al, I didn't ask you. Subaru looked down at his own body and changed his perceptions as he was rebutted out loud. Natsumi Schwartz was now recreated with wigs and makeup, but unlike when she was posing as a dancer, the role she will be required to play here was more intellectual. Therefore, the costume and makeup were designed to reflect this impression. The red-colored outfit with a collar was a one-of-a-kind design based on the officer's uniform of the Volocca Empire, the one worn by Zik. She didn't wear a cloak unless it was necessary for ease of movement, but I'm proud to say that it's quite a bluff. She wore pants underneath, heavy boots on her feet, and a military cap with bird feathers on it to decorate her head. This was the complete picture of Natsumi Schwartz, the female strategist. Subaru, well, I guess I'm more of a female soldier than a female military officer. When you think of a woman in military attire, you'd expect her to be dressed as a man, right? Al, a bro who dresses as a woman dressed as a man. My chaos will only deepen when I see it in writing. Subaru, I don't want to stand out too much, so I'll put it together in an imperial style. Since I'm dressed as a man, I've borrowed a bit of Crush Sand's taste as well. Al, I'm not sure if the Duke will be happy with the hints I've gotten from my previous encounters with her. Am I the only one who thinks this is strange? How about the Emperor over there? As Subaru explained the concept, Al raised his right arm in a show of hands. As he did so, Al turned his raised right arm to the front and pointed water at the figure in front of him, in the middle seat of the carriage, or in other words, the position where the conversation between Subaru and Al was interrupted endlessly, was Abel. Looking out the window with a grim expression, he seemed to be pondering something with a difficult face. He raised his eyebrows at the unintentional name that Al had used, and without turning around, he coldly said, "Fools, Abel, I don't remember allowing you to call me that. Know that one careless word can shake the very existence of the Empire. Or maybe you will have to lose more than just your other arm." Al, give me a break. I've gotten used to it. But an inconvenience is an inconvenience. Now if I lose the other one, it'll be more than just an inconvenience. Abel, then you'd better learn to mind your own business. Al, hey, the Imperial way makes it hard to laugh at jokes. It's hard for a comedian like us, right, bro? Subaru, don't try to ask me. The atmosphere was tense, with no room for jokes or light words. But Subaru had no intention of criticizing the Empire, saying that this was a problem with the country's character. At most, he would recognize Abel as a person with whom he would find it difficult to associate. This was also a complaint that he had never felt on the surface, since his answers were light-hearted. Of course, when it came to issues of beliefs and values, it didn't stop there. Al, so, what do you think of the bros' outfits? Abel-chan, Abel, for a moment, Abel's brows creased at the new name. After a few moments of silence, Abel snorted and silenced the insolence. Subaru guessed he decided that it was better than being called Mr. Emperor. Unable to understand Abel's point of view, Subaru suppressed his inner cringing with a sigh. In the meantime, Abel looked at Subaru again to answer Al's question. Abel, yes, it's a ridiculous ridiculous outfit, but as long as you produce results, I won't say anything about it. You should separate your abilities from your tastes. Subaru, don't shoot me in the back while pretending to follow me. How many times do I have to tell you that it's not a hobby, it's a necessity? Do you think I dress like a woman because I like it? Abel, Subaru, don't you dare shut up. Because of the meaningful silence, the suspicion placed on Subaru was unfairly colored. Naturally, this is a very unpleasant realization for Subaru. If he didn't have to, he wouldn't want to wear women's clothes at all. However, if there was even the slightest possibility that he could overcome the situation by doing so, he just couldn't exclude cross-dressing as an option. That was all there was to it. Subaru, every reason is properly armed with theory. Listen, Al, I said I was armed with a theory, didn't I? I'm sure it's a promise. If the Emperor who has been expelled from his throne recruits helpers to regain it, it is only natural that there should be a position for a mysterious woman to accompany him. Subaru, it's not a heroine. Positions such as soldier, wizard, and so on are not heroines. Heroines that appear in some way in this kind of story. Al, don't get mad at yourself for saying it. You'll surprise everyone besides me. Subaru was indignant, but his intentions were not understood by anyone other than his countryman Al. In the first place, there were many things in the syntax that could not be understood even in his hometown. He had always thought that Al's knowledge was quite close to Subaru's, as he could even use it. Subaru, I've never heard of before, but I never heard about your arrival in this world. So far, even though Subaru shared the information that he and Al were from the same hometown, they had never talked about when they were both transported from the same era. He had heard that Al had been summoned to another world almost 20 years ago. He said that he had suffered a terrible experience and even lost one of his arms. The confession itself was light-hearted, but the reality couldn't possibly be that frivolous. The anguish and despair that Al has had to endure have been a constant part of his days. Al was a man who has suffered more from the harshness of another world than he had. When he talked to him, he realized how fortunate he was compared to him. At the same time, he would agonize over what the difference was between himself and Al, because he was afraid of this. Subaru had never tried to have a deep conversation with Al. Al also did not want to go any further. However, considering the language used and the subculture topics that are commonly understood, the original world where Subaru and Al lived must be the same age. If they were summoned 20 years ago, they must have been the same age at that time. The current age difference between Subaru and Al is merely a function of the time in the other world where they were summoned. That's why even though there is an age difference, their conversations are on the same wavelength. That seemed to be the reason for the vague tingling he felt when interacting with him. Al, I hate promises. Subaru, huh? Al, isn't it also a promise that there's a suspicious wizard beside the Emperor? How about that? Subaru, whose thoughts had gone sideways, was brought back to reality by Al's light words. His eyes blinked, and Subaru nodded his head in agreement with what he called the promise. Subaru, it's a promise. Indeed, a bewitching female wizard cajoles the Emperor and slowly turns him into a puppet of her will. And then the prosperous country collapses. Abel, don't let it collapse on its own. I'm going to get it back, no matter what. Just Subaru. Just, Abel, it wasn't a wizard or a woman, but it was a fact that there was a being called the Stargazer. Subaru. The Stargazer? Abel's words were echoed by Subaru and Al's questioning voices. It was a word they had never heard before, but it was strange. He had never heard of this word before, but strangely enough, he had an idea of the letters in his head, and when the letters fit, the role of the word also came vaguely to mind. Subaru. Maybe they were in the position of a feng shui master or some other kind of fortune teller. Al, or maybe it's more like a prophet of sorts. Even in the kingdom, that was the role of the tablet. Subaru. Yeah, it's called the Dragon Tablet. While being convinced by Al's words, Subaru pulled out his knowledge of the prophecy stone passed down in the kingdom. Although he hadn't seen the actual stone, he had heard that it was a useful artifact that recorded the future events that would come to the kingdom of Lagunica, and also showed the solutions to the problems. However, while predicting the illness and death of the Lagunica royal family, what the stone offered as a solution was the selection of the next king. In other words, the royal election in which Emilia and Priscilla would participate. To be honest, it was an achievement that made me tilt my head at the idea of a grateful prophecy board. Subaru, if you're serious about giving advice on how to save the kingdom, you should be telling people how to cure or stop the disease in the first place. As he found out while deepening my insight as a knight of a candidate for the king's election, the royal family of Lagunica did not behave in a tyrannical or dark manner, and it seems that they were at least loved by the people. Many of their subjects and the vassals were saddened by their deaths, and none were happy. Why the Dragon Tablet had abandoned them was still a mystery. Subaru, it would be a dream within a dream to have a slab of stone as a partner that can provide those answers. Al, if it's a stone slab, then yes, but not if it's a stargazer, right? What was that guy's role in the palace? Abel-chan? Abel, it's not so far from what you know. The power of the stargazer was to peer into the future, to maintain the empire. Abel's answer to the question was roughly in line with the impression given by the name Stargazer. Nevertheless, there was one problem. Al: he could predict the future, but you still got kicked out. Abel, I told you so. The power of the Stargazer is for the maintenance of the empire. It's not necessarily compatible with my safety. Subaru, that means it would be better for the empire if you were chased away. Abel, at least, that's what the Stargazer has decided. Abel crossed his arms quietly as he replied matter-of-factly. It seems that the prophetic stone and the Stargazer, two things with similar roles, have overlooked the plight of what should be the most precious position in their respective countries. It is tempting to suspect some kind of connection between the kingdom and the empire, but, Subaru, before that, I have a feeling that there's a problem with you being abandoned by the Prime Minister, the right-hand man and the prophet. Are you sure you're okay to be put back in the position of Emperor? You? Al, oh, come on, that's a bit too fireball straight, bro. Subaru, no, because, don't you feel uneasy when you hear about this peripheral situation? Al, but that's it. General Afro approved of Abel-chan, didn't he? Subaru, oh, I see, then it's okay. Subaru was quietly convinced by the mention of Zigra. The Afro general. Zigra was on Abel's side, which is a relief. To put it another way, without Zigra, it was highly doubtful that he could have gone along with Abel. Without doubts, it didn't matter what happened to the Empire, no matter how much he wanted to get himself and Rem back to the kingdom safely. To be honest, he had more bad memories of the Empire than good ones, but there were many people he wanted to see happy, including the Shadrach people and the O'Connell siblings. Subaru, I'm starting to wonder if I can include you in that. Abel, no matter what you say, no matter what the Stargazer will see tomorrow, I have my answer. Subaru, Abel, if the Stargazer decides that I cannot remain on the throne, I will not obey it. If the Stargazer says that my presence will destroy the Empire, then I will overturn it with my own hands. Abel's declaration was more than a little passionate. It was the same fervor as when he said he would take back the throne on numerous occasions. This was Abel's uncompromising line and his unshakable heart. It was not just a vengeance or rebellion, but a larger and purer conviction, which is why Subaru didn't doubt Abel at the last line. Other than that, he really wanted him to embellish more of his surroundings and make us believe in him. Guys, look a little bit forward. Subaru. Just as the conversation was settling down, a vigorous voice suddenly arrived from the front of the carriage, towards the governor's stand, and Subaru and the others turned their attention to it. The one who raised a lively voice was Medium, who was holding the reins of Ludi at the retainer's stand. It seems that she was not allowed to take the reins during her trip with Flop, but she took the initiative and said, I want to do it. Medium, with her slender height on the reins stand, was holding the reins in one hand and pointing the way ahead with the other. Medium, I can see something messing around in front of me. Can you see it, Natsumi-chan? Subaru, I see something that looks more like a pea than a grain of beans. Maybe. He leaned out of the carriage window, but he was not sure what Medium meant by messing around. Maybe it was the angle, or maybe it was just her eyesight. He thought Subaru had good eyesight, but in a different world. That was no longer the case. People from other worlds have eyesight of a different level. Emilia's eyesight is probably 5.0 as well. In his original world, he saw a program that said that people in Africa had exceptionally good eyesight. From that point of view, he had high hopes for Talitha's eyesight as one of the Amazons of the other world. Subaru, so, how about Talitha-san? Can you see something? Talitha, wait a minute. That's Talitha answers Subaru's call, but she's not in the carriage or on the got or die. Subaru leans out the window and calls out to her from wherever she is. On top of the carriage, Talitha was positioned on the roof of the running carriage, and she was acting as a watcher from there, alert in all directions. Al, is it just me, or does it make you uncomfortable to have people on your roof? Subaru, I don't know about Abel, but I'm used to it with our Garfield. Al mentions Talitha on the carriage, but Subaru, who is familiar with Garfield who wanted to play the same role, doesn't feel particularly comfortable with that. Rather seriously, since vigilance while on the move is essential in the other world, it would also have a decent effect, more than just a midlife crisis. The fact that Abel didn't stop her is proof of that. Talitha, well, it looks like the Imperial Guard is gathering. It looks like the cattle carts and other vehicles in front of us have been stopped. Al, that's Abel. Checkpoints, Abel muttered after receiving Talitha's report and understanding the situation. What passed through Subaru's mind when he heard the word checkpoint was the one that was held at the main gate of Geralt. However, the fact that it was a checkpoint held not at the entrance of the city, but in the middle of the street, caught his attention. Checking the comings and goings of a city was a natural process, but a checkpoint on a road gives the distinct impression that it is in response to some kind of anomaly. To put it bluntly, there was a high possibility that they were looking for something specific. Subaru, no way, is that us? Arakia got away, and that's how things got spread. Abel, of course, it's inevitable that the details will eventually leak out from Arakia. However, I don't believe that it can move so quickly and accurately. In addition, the Magic City is in the opposite direction of the Imperial City. Subaru, in terms of location, the report won't go through? Abel, yes, although, you do have a problem with your companion. With his arms in a crossed posture, Abel was concerned not about Arakia, but her companion. Arakia's companion, in other words, is the person who took her out of Geralt. Al, the guy who dragged Miss Arakia away. He's the kind of guy who would fearlessly ride into the middle of enemy territory in that situation. So I guess there's a chance that he's a sharp guy. Subaru, a sharp guy. Abel's concern and Al's point of view made Subaru imagine something unpleasant. If we limit it to the Imperial soldiers who were in that citadel, Subaru has an idea of who the sharp ones are, and that person, who was the object of Subaru's fear, could not be found among the Imperial soldiers who had surrendered after the fall of the city hall. Perhaps it was among the soldiers who had abandoned the city and fled. Subaru, no way, huh? No matter how much I wanted to, I didn't want to think that it was that man who had taken out Arakia. I don't want to think that the fate of the relationship between the two of us will deepen to any extent. Subaru, I don't know. Right now, we need to focus on the problem at hand. What do we do? Can we go around it? Al, right now, I don't think they're even aware of us yet. Medium and Talitha, two people with excellent eyesight, spotted them first. We could probably get off the street and avoid the checkpoints before the soldiers at the end of the road noticed us. If you don't have a stomach that hurts from being searched, you can pass with impunity. But if you have a stomach that hurts from being searched, you have no choice but to avoid the checkpoint. But Abel, wait, don't go around. Subaru, just before he gave the order to get out of the way, Abel, of all people, called out to him to wait. At his call for restraint, Subaru turned his eyes to Abel. Subaru, what are you going to do if we don't go around? If they find you, you're in trouble. Abel, I want to know what they're up to. If it's about the fall of Geralt, they're moving too fast. If it's about my whereabouts, I'd like to find out what the soldiers say they're looking for. Subaru, am trying to say, what if they find you? Then you'll be like poking a beehive, and we'll have to plunge into a raging car chase. Of course, there was also the possibility that he would be lassoed on the spot. Of the 5 people in the carriage, only 3, excluding Subaru and Abel, were capable of fighting, but their total strength was not so different from the dancing troops who had ridden into Geralt. If they went on the run with their wagons, it would be extremely difficult to scatter the enemy on the wide streets. Subaru, the conditions are too bad. Or is there a better way? Abel, there is. You, Subaru. Huh? Subaru was stunned as he weighed the risks and rewards and thought that the odds were against him. They were supposed to be talking about the odds of taking on a risky bet right now. Subaru, what do you mean? I'm the one who comes out there. Abel, there is already a precedent for this in the Citadel. The carriages were disguised so that you wouldn't know they belonged to the military. It will be as agreed upon beforehand. Subaru, but that's just a setting for small talk on the road. Abel stated brashly that it was a setup for making small talk with other vendors and travelers along the way, not for fooling the Imperial soldiers who were keeping a close eye on them. Nevertheless, Abel turned a deaf ear to Subaru's screaming plea. Abel, I'm going to hide in the bottom of the wagon, and you're going to make the soldiers talk. Subaru, whoa. Are you serious? Abel, don't let them look in the bottom of the wagon. Subaru, I don't know why you're so high and mighty. Abel stood up from his seat and put his hands on the floor. There was a slight gap in the floor underneath the seat, and the floorboards flipped up to allow him to get down to the bottom. Originally, of the carriage was intended to be pulled by Zabsgale horses, the second in command. The exterior of the carriage has been replaced and disguised so that it cannot be identified as belonging to the Imperial Army, but this does not mean that its function has been sealed off. The carriages were designed to be used by people of high rank, and the floorboards could be removed to hide in case of emergency. The craftsman of the carriage never imagined that it would be the Emperor who would be hiding. Anyway, Abel quickly pulled up the floorboards and twisted his thin body into the narrow space. Seriously, he really left the rest to Subaru. It was more about arrogance than boldness. Al, oh, man, Abel-chan is so forceful. Nevertheless, we have no choice but to do it, bro. Al's comment to Abel, who just said what he wanted to say and quickly withdrew. What he said after that was based on the reaction of the checkpoints in the path of the carriage. Apparently, our presence had been revealed to them as well. Talitha, Natsumi, that side has also noticed our presence. Medium, then it looks like we have no choice but to go. Alright, let's go for it. Natsumi-chan, politely. Talitha and Medium's shouts eliminated the option of detouring. If they changed direction at this point, it would be like advertising that it would be inconvenient to have our carriage inspected. Therefore, they had no choice but to proceed as the Emperor wishes, even if it was abhorrent. Al, bro, are you ready? Subaru, yes, I'm ready. I'll take care of it. Al, that's a hell of a switch, slapping his cheek slightly with both hands. Subaru flips a switch inside herself. If he smacked her cheek too hard, her makeup would fall off. If he scratched her head, his hair would fall into disarray. If he didn't shelve his inner irritation, his words would become rough. But that was not the way to win over the Imperial Guard. You have to play the role that is required of you and fulfill the role that is expected of you. That was the first step for Natsuki Subaru to regain his lost trust. Natsumi, well, thank you for your hard work. Military people, what in the world can I do for you? Natsumi leaned out of the window and waved cheerfully to the Imperial soldiers who stopped the carriage, smiling as best she could in a pretty and charming way. The Imperial soldiers who stopped the carriage didn't take the fact that it was carrying only Al, in addition to the 3 women, Medium, Talitha and Subaru, very seriously. They were asked about the identity of the group and the purpose of the trip. As they had discussed beforehand, Al and Medium were hired as guards for Subaru, the daughter of a low-ranking count, and Talitha was to be Subaru's servant. Before they left Geralt, they tried to change Talitha's fashion from the Amazoness style, which was instantly recognizable as Shadrak's people. At present, Talitha was dressed as a butler-style man in accordance with Subaru's preference, and Al praises her, saying, my bro is dressed as a woman and Talitha-chan is dressed as a man. Anyway, the Imperial soldiers at the checkpoint were not suspicious of Subaru and the others in such a state, but only when we told them that our destination was Kaz Flame. They showed a meaningful hesitation, saying, but even among them, their impression of the Magic City seemed to be bad. Soldier, I wouldn't recommend going to Demon City. Young lady, Natsumi, even if you say so, I'm afraid my father will be angry with me. Even though you are a nobleman, you can't afford to be extravagant. In the family of a lowly count. Soldier, I see. Well, you seem to have a good head on your shoulders, so no need to worry. Natsumi, oh my, you're good at that. Smiling with the back of her hand over her mouth, Subaru elegantly avoided the soldier's suspicion. In general, there seemed to be no problem in getting through the checkpoint. Now all that's left is Natsumi. It's quite a bit of stuff, by the way. Did something happen? Soldier, no, it's nothing serious. We're looking for a deserter from a recent skirmish near Badheim in the north. We're also looking for a wanted criminal. Natsumi, wanted? Subaru frowned at the sound of that, careful not to make his voice whisper. Fortunately, the soldier didn't seem to notice Subaru's surging inner thoughts and nodded. Yeah, soldier, there's a story that a man wanted in the Imperial capital was spotted around here. It's said that he's about 50 years old, with blue hair. Any idea who he is? Natsumi, no, I'm afraid not. But to have a deserter from the Imperial soldiers, who are known for their strength, makes me worried that the winds of the Empire are somehow disturbed. Medium, don't worry, Natsumi-chan, we're here for you, so don't worry, we're here for you. Natsumi, well, that's reassuring. Medium-san, oh ho ho. I'm sure she wasn't aiming for that, but Medium's frank comment made the Imperial soldiers lose their good mood. Talitha was silent as well, playing the role of a steward who would not interrupt his master's words. In her case, she has a tendency to be shy, so silence may be a bare minimum. And apart from the women, the one who seemed to be the most anxious was the suspicious-looking Al. Al, I'd like to thank all the soldiers for their hard work. It's thanks to your hard work that a half-wit like me is allowed to work so lazily. Soldier, we're only working for the peace of the Empire. It's not for the sake of inertia like yours. Al, I know what I'm doing and I know my position. Al, too, performed his rude move perfectly, which was belittled by the Imperial soldiers. It was hard to tell if he was just pretending or acting, but he had a good point. The unnaturalness of hiring the ship's armed Al as a bodyguard was also squashed by Subaru ahead of time. Natsumi, it wouldn't look good if you didn't say you hired him as a bodyguard, would it? That man's arm must have been one of the soldiers who served his country before. Soldier : if he resigned his position because of his injury, there is nothing we can say. Just be very careful, because you may not be free of evil thoughts. He treated Al's ship's arm as a strength rather than a weakness, reinforcing the rationale for his frivolous attitude. Even the Imperial soldiers, with their aversion to inertia and their respect for the strong, were considerate of those who had retired from the front lines due to unhealed wounds. With that in mind, the checkpoint was overcome without any major problems. Medium. Well, Natsumi-chan was very impressive. I'm impressed with you. Medium praised as she waved her hand at the Imperial soldiers from the guard stand. In response to her words, Subaru shook his head and said, No, number, Natsumi, I'm not that important. If we had been at the checkpoint for a more pressing reason, we would have had to use a lot of finesse to get through. In that sense, I guess you could say we were all lucky. Medium. Is that so? Then I guess so. I'm often told that I'm lucky by Chan too. I feel that way too. Natsumi. Both Medium-san and Flop-san are geniuses at finding happiness. Subaru also smiled at Medium's pleasant answer while putting his hand on his cheek. Talitha, who was sitting in the front seat of the carriage with a look of exhaustion on her face, looked back at the exchange between Subaru and Medium. Subaru tilted his head at her meaningful gaze, as she was relieved of her tension and patted her chest in relief. Natsumi, what's the matter? Talitha-san, is there a problem? Talitha, no, there is no problem. Natsumi, how can you be so brazen? I also thought about it when you were planning to come in as a dancer. Natsumi : well, yes. Talitha's senses had a hard time adjusting to the change in Subaru's appearance. As a woman, Talitha has known Subaru in women's clothing for as long as Abel, since the day they boarded the Geralt. Still, it seemed strange to her. In a way, Abel and Flop were able to pull it off without any switching, while Bianca and Flora were able to overcome any problems with their natural beauty. Of course, Natsumi Schwartz, played by Subaru, did not have such a foundation. There is a quality that cannot be disguised by clothing or makeup alone, and it is a problem that inevitably arises for those who do not have it. It takes effort to make up for it. Natsumi, that's why I just tried so hard. Natsumi Schwartz's perfection is part of the result of humanity's accumulated quest for beauty. If it weren't for the pioneers, Subaru's cross-dressing would be a substitute that wouldn't even pass muster at a school arts festival. In order to make it viable, there were many wishes and efforts of our predecessors. It was because of this that we are also aware that we cannot disregard what has been established. Talitha, I envy you for your confidence in. I don't have that. Natsumi, confidence. I have confidence in Natsumi Schwartz, but confidence is a different thing. Talitha, what? Al, oh, come on, bro, don't do that. It'll confuse Talitha-chan. That level of thinking is a little too much for me to follow too. You know? Talitha's eyes were black and white as Al interrupted Subaru's theory. He was not aware that he was talking about something so difficult as to confuse them. He simply said that even though it was difficult to believe in himself, he could believe in the ideal image that he has created in his mind, that he could believe in. Natsumi, I always envision myself as the best I can be, isn't that right? Talitha, whoa, I find that a difficult mindset for me. Natsumi, but I do recommend it as a mindset, don't you? Comparing yourself to the person you admire can be painful, but you can envision your ideal self. Talitha's eyes widened slightly as Subaru spoke with her hand on her chest. There was something that seemed to resonate with her in no small way. Talitha, you can envision your ideal self at so much so that she seemed to have quietly taken it to heart. Al, well, aside from the deserter, I don't know what the guy being chased did, and it was a pretty big deal. Even if it's a big help that Abel-chan's story didn't spread. Natsumi, well, a blue-haired man of about 50 years old. I'm sure there are many gentlemen who fit that description, and I can even think of one in my memory. You know, in the original world, blue hair does not occur naturally, but in this other world, it is not so rare that it can be seen as a coloration, especially in Rem, the wanted criminal at the checkpoint just now, for example, and the heavy drinker who once helped me and Geralt, a mercenary named Rowan, also fit that description. Unfortunately, Rowan's demonstration of his abilities was unsuccessful due to Todd's surprise attack, but Subaru believes that he would have been quite capable if he could have fought honestly. However, I don't think he's a wanted man that would require the mobilization of many Imperial soldiers, so he was probably saying that someone with similar characteristics was being hunted. Natsumi, in any case, Abel's situation has not yet been conveyed to the general soldiers. As long as there is no chaos in the Imperial capital, it seems that we can assume that a shadow warrior is acting as the Emperor. Al, that sounds like a good thing or a bad thing. I'm not sure if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but I think it would have been more convenient for us if the Emperor hadn't been there to make a scene. Natsumi, it's a bit of a win-win situation, isn't it? Regardless of how it will be handled if he is found, the fact that Abel is being searched for doesn't change the difficulty. If the Emperor's absence became public knowledge and caused chaos in the Empire, it was currently unknown whether Subaru and the others would be able to navigate it successfully. At the very least, Abel is of the opinion that they are not strong enough yet to come forward, and Subaru is of the same opinion. Instead, he was very nervous when he suggested that they go through the checkpoint. Anyway, now that we're out of the checkpoint, let's get Abel-chan out. Natsumi, yes. Besides, I'd like to complain to him. Nodding at Al's suggestion, Subaru crossed his arms and claimed the fake twin hills, revealing his resentment. Subaru's indignation was caused, of course, by his recklessness in getting through the checkpoint, but more so by Abel's recklessness in rampaging restlessly through the checkpoint. While he was talking to the soldiers, there was a lot of noise coming from the bottom of the carriage, and it was very difficult to fool them. In the end, it was settled that it was a stomach bug, with Subaru posing as a limp-wristed young lady, saying, "It's not easy being a lowly count." It was an outrage that damaged the reputation of the elegant Natsumi Schwartz. Natsumi, your majesty, you seem to be unaware of your position. Al, oh, bro, you're angry. Well, I guess I should be angry too. Al agreed with Subaru, who was eager to complain to the reckless emperor. Subaru then peers into the bottom of the rocking carriage to see Al's face as he flips up the floorboard. Natsumi, hey, Abel, what's going on? You have no idea how hard it was for us to cover up for you after you did that to us. Woo. Natsumi, hey. Subaru jumped out of the way and fell into Talitha's arms, her bitterness overwhelmed by the scream. Talitha quickly carried him in her arms, but he didn't have time to admire her good physique. What appeared was not Abel with a big smile on his face, but a young girl with golden hair. The girl was familiar and had more than enough bad memories. It was Louis, the girl who should not be the Louisiana, the representative of the irregulars in the empire, jumped out cheerfully from under the floor. Natsumi, Louis, Natsumi, why are you in this carriage? Abel, apparently, she has been hiding under the floor for a long time. She didn't expect anyone to notice her until this point. It was probably the work of the Utakata. Subaru's eyes are black and white, his voice quivering with fear, but Abel takes up Subaru's question and follows Louis from the bottom. He patted the dust off his dirty traveling clothes and hand-combed his wildly disheveled black hair. Then he sees Louis leaning in towards Subaru, who is still being held up by Talitha. Abel, it looks like she missed you a lot. She chose to be with you rather than Utakata or your woman. Natsumi, what are you talking about? Were you okay under the floor with her? Abel, how could it be okay? The girl was unnecessarily rampaging at the bottom, and I was chilled to the bone. I wondered how I could get away with it when the soldiers found out because of her. Abel closed the floorboards and returned to his seat, and Subaru's mind made sense. It seemed that Louis was the cause of the commotion that had distracted Subaru so much while the Imperial soldiers were inspecting the carriage. I don't know what Abel was doing to him, but apparently he doesn't have a talent for nurturing children. Natsumi, then what the hell can you do? Abel, you're talking dishonor to me everywhere. But what are you going to do about it? Natsumi, what are you going to do about it? Abel, I'm telling you, there's no way I'm turning back now. That checkpoint and time won't allow it. Al, well, I guess Abel-chan is right about that. Touching the seam of the helmet he was wearing, Al nodded his head to Abel's words. Meanwhile, Subaru had Talitha set him down on the floor, holding Louis's forehead in agony as he rubbed against him with a laugh. Natsumi, why is this happening? Confusion and bewilderment swirled in his head. On the other hand, there was a part of him that felt the relief that grew from Louis being here, that he didn't have to leave this anxiety factor beside Rem he left behind in Geralt. Of course, being followed by Subaru would not diminish his alertness to Louis' true nature. Wondering what he was up to, Talitha, there's nothing we can do. Subaru, I'm taking Louis with us. Natsumi, is that what you're saying? Talitha-san, Talitha, Abel is right. We have no choice but to turn back now, but we can't leave Louis behind either. I know that you and Louis have a complicated relationship. Natsumi, looking alternately at Subaru and Louis, Talitha wryly offered a neutral opinion. In addition to their mission to infiltrate Geralt, they had also spent time together in the settlement of the Shadrach people, and the majority of the Shadrachs, though not as many as Rem, were aware of Subaru's wariness and hostility towards Louis and his existence. Even with that in mind, Talitha said, leaving Louis behind is not an option, and to his chagrin, Subaru agreed with her. Natsumi, we can't leave this behind and cause trouble for people who don't know anything about it. Louis tilted her head, his face showing that she didn't understand anything. As of now, ever since she was sent to Vonica, Louis has never shown her face as that vicious glutton is deadly sin bishop, but that doesn't mean that he won't continue to do so in the future, and he believed that Subaru is responsible for the damage that will be caused when his true nature comes out. Subaru had every reason to be convinced that she was dangerous, and had countless opportunities to prevent much damage from occurring. All he had to do was to strangle her thin neck at this very moment and end her future. With just that, many seeds of anxiety would wither and die without sprouting. And yet Natsumi, Al, oh dear, I don't know what it is, but that little girl misses bro, doesn't she? I'm sure you'll be able to understand that it may slow you down in the future, but you should think about it and use it. Natsumi, Al. As he said this, Al tried to help the anguished Subaru make a decision. He stepped on the floor of the carriage in a casual tone and walked over to Louis, who stood beside Subaru. Then he gently tries to stroke the girl's blonde head and says, Al, if you have one child, it might be easier for the soldiers to look away if there is a similar checkpoint again. Traveling with a child isn't so bad after all. Ouch, Louis, gah. Just as Al's hand was about to stroke his head, Louis suddenly bared her fangs. Literally, Louis opened her big mouth and bit Al's outstretched hand as hard as he could. When the screaming Al pulled his hand away, Louis snarled like an animal and hid behind Subaru. It was an ungrateful act, like an unwanted stray cat biting the person who tried to feed it. Al, whoa, that fucking hurt. I tried to follow you and I lost it. Natsumi, well, you've done it. I knew it was your remo to prey on others like that. Louis, you, oh, Natsumi, I can't tell by the end. Louis is clinging to Subaru's waist, bobbing her head, and Subaru struggles to pull her off, but the corset is too tight for him to move. Fortunately, Subaru knows who Al is by name, and Al himself doesn't seem to have lost his identity due to the loss of his memory, but the damage is yet to be confirmed. Talitha, please calm down. Natsumi, hi Louis, woo. Subaru and Al, the two of them started to make a lot of noise, and Louis started to scream loudly as if she was having a tantrum. Talitha interrupts them, raising her voice to interrupt. She put her hand in Louis' side and picked the girl up, shooting Subaru and Al straight in the eyes with her strong eyes, much like her sisters. Talitha, you're a grown man, and you're a child. Why don't you behave like a calm adult? The little ones will mimic you. Natsumi, yes, but Talitha-san, that girl is. Talitha, but no. Natsumi, I know that your relationship with this girl is complicated. I know your relationship with her is complicated, but what are you going to do by making a fuss about it? It was the simplicity of the reprimand that Subaru responded to the most. He wondered how many of them would be able to win against such an argument if they were told that they were not mature enough to deal with children. However, such a cute theory does not apply to the Bishop of Mortal Sin. If she knew the danger of Louis, Talitha would surely have an opinion. If that's the case, he can tell everyone who Louis really is right here and now. Natsumi, his throat choked on the black emotion that echoed from within my own chest. Talitha and Al reacted quizzically to Subaru's tense cheeks. In the end, it was all Subaru's ambiguous decision-making ability that brought about the situation. In order for Subaru to understand Louis' wariness, he has to tell him the fact that Louis is the Bishop of Gluttony. Unlike Rem, who had lost his memory as well as his wariness of witch cult, the people here would be able to understand the threat. Once they realized the gravity of the situation, they would not treat Louis as the child he appeared to be, and to get rid of the disruptors. What will you do to get rid of them? Natsumi, Louis, woo. Louis tilted her head to meet Subaru's gaze as Talitha held her. If Subaru and Al stop being so noisy, Louis will calm down at once as well. As I've found out in the past hours, Louis only makes noise when there's a lot of noise around her. If everyone around her is calm, Louis won't try to make too much noise by herself. The reason why she is so good with you, Takata, is because she is an exceptionally calm child. I wonder if her appearance is a mimicry to help Louis blend in with his surroundings. Is it a disguise for the vicious and irredeemably evil girl that Subaru met in the White World that she arrived at in the Pleiades Watchtower? I know that I should think so and deal with it. And yet, Abel, let me remind you, our goal is not amusement or amusement. Abel, who is alone in the seat beside Subaru, who was still in agony, says coldly. For a moment, Subaru couldn't decipher the meaning of his words, but he soon understood that it was Abel's opinion about Louis' treatment. This road trip was not a game, Abel assured him as soon as he said that and looked into the dark eyes of Louis. Subaru gasped at the coldness of them. There was no heat in Abel's eyes as he looked at Louis. It was a sign that Abel did not see the value of giving any consideration or warmth to Louis, that he did not distinguish him from a stone on the roadside or a wild flower. The heat in his eyes made Subaru understand the consequences of revealing Louis' true identity. Natsumi, I'll take her. Abel, immediately after making his decision, the black eyes looking at Louis turned to Subaru. The sharpness of his gaze felt like it was cutting into his chest, but Subaru bit his back teeth and drove it out of his mind. Natsumi, as long as you're not traveling for fun, show them that you're useful. That's what you're saying, isn't it? Abel, yeah, fine. You would say that. Natsumi, that's a difficult assessment to interpret. There was no way to tell if it was meant to be disappointing or otherwise upsetting. Naturally, Abel didn't want to reveal his true intentions, and Subaru was afraid that rehashing them would lead to a different conclusion. Medium. Hey, did you get your story straight? When you're done, Louis-chan, come here. Talitha, it's okay. Feeling the tense air between Subaru and Abel, Talitha asked for permission to respond to Medium's voice flying from the platform. Abel was already self-conscious, and although he decided to take Subaru with him, he didn't want to take Louis' hand, so he decided to take advantage of their generosity. Medium, alright, Louis-chan, you want to hold the reins? Lady Chin, let's try to control it. Louis, woo. Medium, let's not do that. Louis seemed to have been welcomed by the two women, as there was suddenly a lot of noise at the Goshindai. There was nothing surprising about their reaction, since Subaru was the only one who had originally been very wary of Louis. If anything, Louis' disappearance had left the remaining Rem and Geralt scrambling to find her. Natsumi, I don't think that girl could have gotten into the carriage by herself. If there was something that helped, that thing would have revealed the situation. Abel, that's true, isn't it? Subaru's expression gave away the nature of his concern, and Abel coldly dismissed it. If he was right and Takata had helped Louis go into hiding, that information would have been shared with the Rems in the city. Subaru and Louis were together, though it was doubtful that it would help Rem's anxiety. Natsumi, I'm not sure which they think is better, not knowing where you are or Al, well, of course it's safer to have Bro with you, but Talitha-chan said it was more complicated than that. Al's words, overhearing the murmur, gave Subaru a mixed feeling. The relationship between Subaru, Rem, and Louis was not so simple. Natsumi, but yeah, with the image of Rem behind his eyelids, Subaru finds an excuse within himself. Regardless of the merits of Louis' identity, Rem will be concerned for the girl. Regardless of whether Louis is right or wrong, Rem will be worried about the girl, and even if he sees an opportunity to tell her the truth, it will be in vain without Louis. So, Louis had to be safe. Al, bro, Natsumi, no, not without everything, I guess. Al, do me a favor for you, please. Can you keep Louis as well taken care of as possible? Al, what's with the crazy request? Anyway, what's with the little girl? Al, who had just been bitten on the hand, seemed to have a hard time with Louis, and he responded to Subaru's request in a disgusted voice. asking the truth behind it. It was a natural question, but for a moment, Subaru hesitated to answer. If it was Al, he would believe Louis' identity more honestly than the others. However, how would Al act if he knew that Louis was the bishop of deadly sins? Would he understand the danger and become a confidant for the same problems as Subaru? Natsumi, if that girl gets hurt, Ren will suffer. Please, please, Al. A moment later, Subaru was troubled, but like the others, he withheld the truth. Upon hearing Subaru's answer, Al was silent for a moment. But Al, yeah, got it. I'm worried that it might eat the rest of my arm, but I'll deal with it. Then he took a seat at the front of the carriage as if he was doing Subaru a favor. He threw his legs out sluggishly as he listened to the voices of the three girls bustling about on the leader's platform. It was a typical way for him to accept a request. Natsumi, what is it? Looking at the back of Al's head, Subaru suddenly noticed Abel's gaze on him. He had his arms folded and was slumped in his seat, his emotionless black eyes reflecting Subaru's, and he was frowning with just a hint of displeasure. This made him very uneasy, and Subaru's question became pointed. Abel, however, gave a small hum and said nothing. Natsumi, in the first place, you haven't even thanked me for getting through the checkpoint successfully. She stroked her long black hair and settled into a seat some distance away from Al and Abel. The journey to the demon city of Kazflame continues with a sense of uncertainty about the future. However, when he heard the joyful voices of Louis and the others coming from the Gossordai, he knew that he had to do something. Subaru, whose fault do you think we are suffering from? The sound of the carriage driving swallowed it up, and such complaining words did not reach anyone.